Hi, I'm Nicholas from Ratings.com. Today we'll be looking at Samsung's mid-range option, the QN85D. Historically, the QN85 line has been very good, even great, but we don't often recommend them as they don't usually perform as well as their competition in the same price bracket. But what about the QN85D? How good is it? Let's find out. We've bought and tested the 65-inch model, but the results are valid for all the other sizes. This TV has a nice design from the front, but from the sides, it looks like a much thicker version of last year's Samsung QN85C. We're not sure what happened, but the newer model is almost twice as thick as the older one. It doesn't look bad by any means, it just won't look as nice when mounted flush against the wall. From the back, the TV looks good, again very similar to last year's model. The back is made of plastic and has a nice textured design. You'll also notice the small metallic stand. It looks good, and even though it doesn't stop the TV from wobbling, it's not too bad for such a small stand. It lifts the TV nearly 3 inches off the table, so you'll be able to fit almost any soundbar below it without blocking part of the screen. The stand also has tracks for your cables, keeping your setup clean. You might have noticed, but there's something peculiar about the back. There are slots on each side of the TV for alternate feet. However, no alternate feet were included in the box, though there are covers for the slots. Moving on to the inputs, they're set into the back of the TV, which makes them hard to reach if you have the TV wall mounted with a fixed bracket. There are 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, all of which are capable of 4K up to 120Hz. The third HDMI port doubles as an eARC port, which is capable of passing through many advanced audio formats from Dolby. But like any Samsung TV, it can't pass through any advanced DTS audio formats. This really matters for physical media lovers who want the best possible sound, as many Blu-rays use DTS. This means you may have to look elsewhere if that's important to you. Otherwise, the TV also has 2 USB 2.0 ports, 1 LAN port, and a digital optical audio out port. There's also an antenna connection with ATSC 1.0 support. Like other Samsung models released this year, the TV comes with a 2024 version of Samsung's Tizen OS. On this TV, we found the interface to be sometimes slow to open for no obvious reason, and other times the TV wouldn't register when changing input labels. When it does work well, it's smooth and easy to use. And of course, this TV has ads that you can't fully disable. You can turn off targeted ones, but you can't turn off all ads on this TV that you just bought with your hard-earned money. The QN85D comes with the same excellent remote as other Samsung models. It's small, simple, but very functional. There's no numpad, but there are buttons for the most popular streaming services. The remote also has an integrated mic that works with Bixby and Alexa voice assistants. You can charge the controller through USB-C or with the solar panel on the back. Now it's time to talk about image quality. We're starting with a bang, as this TV's contrast is fantastic. It's a huge upgrade over last year's QN85C, and this is mainly due to this TV's VA panel, which replaces the ADS panel Samsung used in the past. What's interesting about this year's model is that it has a lot less local dimming zones than in the past. 160 on the QN85D versus 720 on the QN85C on the 65-inch models. Truly, it's not about how many dimming zones you have, it's how you use them. The QN85D can produce extremely deep blacks that don't look great when viewed in a dark room. Plus, blacks stay deep even when bright highlights are on the screen. Unfortunately, this stellar contrast comes at the cost of slightly worse blooming than last year's model, but not by much. Still, there's noticeable blooming around bright highlights and subtitles in dark scenes. Another inconvenience of local dimming zones is lighting zone transitions. On this TV, the transitions are decent, but the algorithm that controls local dimming can't keep up with fast content. When bright highlights move quickly across the screen, the leading edge is darker, and there's also a halo. When it comes to HDR brightness, this TV is excellent. Here, local dimming works its magic as small, specular highlights stand out very well. Large, bright scenes are dimmer, but they're still very bright. The TV's automatic brightness limiter, or ABL, isn't aggressive at all, so variations in brightness are kept to a minimum, although they're still there. For gamers, the TV is a bit dimmer in game mode than in Filmmaker, but it's still great, and the highlights still pop, albeit at the cost of a bit more blooming than in other picture modes. Even in SDR, the TV is bright enough to overcome glare in extremely bright rooms. Plan on watching football on a sunny Sunday afternoon? That won't be a problem. Fortunately, the TV's EBL isn't aggressive in SDR, but large, bright scenes are still dimmer than scenes with smaller highlights. It handles reflections well, especially from sources directly in front of the screen. The TV uses a semi-gloss coating, which diffuses reflections across the screen, making them bigger but less bright. The TV has a narrow viewing angle. This is due to the VA panel, which is a departure from the past releases of the QN85 series. While it gives the TV a much better contrast ratio, it comes at the cost of a much worse viewing angle. The image washes out at an angle, so sit directly in front of it for the best experience. On a more positive note, the TV's accuracy is very good before calibration. Although the auto color space setting tends to slightly oversaturate colors, still its white balance is excellent, but brighter whites are off. And its color temperature is just a tad colder than the target of 6500 Kelvin, so it's a bit too blue. Its gamma, however, is way too bright in brighter scenes. Look, that curve looks like a ski hill. That's bright. Nothing stops you from getting this TV calibrated, of course. Though you should note that the auto setting is still oversaturated after the fact, but its white balance, color temperature, and gamma are now much closer to the calibration target, although it requires some aggressive tuning since the gamma is so overbrightened to start with. Dang, this is one accurate TV in HDR content, although it once again has a weird curve. What's up with this stair-stepping? The sudden dip below the curve in the middle indicates that midtones are too dark. The curve then behaves weirdly after the TV hits its peak brightness. It's more typical when testing with an industry standard 10% window, but overall, these results show that some highlights might look weird depending on the scene. Overall though, the TV follows the PQ EOTF curve extremely closely. There's a slight roll-off with content mastered at all levels when the TV reaches its peak brightness, preserving bright details and highlights. When you see the word Samsung, you might immediately think, colorful. Well, even if you don't, you should, as this is once again a very colorful Samsung TV. Surprise! It can display almost the entire range of colors in the widely used DCI-P3 color space, so HDR content is vivid and lifelike, although most colors are slightly undersaturated. If you're confused because earlier we said that the TV was oversaturated, that was in SDR. We're talking about HDR here. Anyways, it also has good coverage of the Rec 2020 color space, although some colors are noticeably off, in particular green and cyan. Sadly, Samsung is lagging behind other big name brands when it comes to processing. Its low quality content smoothing is alright. It's pretty good at preserving details when smoothing out content from lower resolution sources, like some streaming services, but this comes at the cost of too much macro blocking, which is noticeable in dark scenes. Thankfully, the TV does a better job when upscaling lower resolution content. It's good enough that a weak signal stream looks sharp, although you lose some fine details in the process. This TV uses pulse width modulation, or PWM, to dim its backlight, so unfortunately, it's not flicker-free. The flicker frequency varies between picture modes and at different brightness settings. Below max brightness, movie mode flickers at 960 Hz, while game and filmmaker modes flicker at 120 Hz. At max brightness, all three are flicker-free, which is amazing. We love flicker-free. On the other hand, standard, eco, and dynamic flicker at 120 Hz at any brightness setting, so stay away from these modes if flicker bothers you, and stick to game, filmmaker, or movie instead. That's what you're doing anyway, right? Right? The Samsung QN85D automatically removes Judder from any source, with no additional settings needed. As a result, motion appears smooth, making it great for watching movies. Good stuff. Now it's gaming time. Hey, this TV is pretty good for gaming. Its response time is great. Sure, there's overshoot that causes inverse ghosting, but overall, it's very fast. The TV also has incredibly low input lag in game mode. Just make sure you stick to game mode, as the input lag is too high in every other mode. If you feel like your TV is 2 steps behind your inputs, make sure it's in game mode. You're welcome. The TV supports most common resolutions up to 4K at 120 Hz. All supported formats display Chroma 444 signals properly, which is essential for clear text from a PC. This is great stuff, but we did encounter a scaling issue with NVIDIA graphics cards. The TV doesn't natively support 1440p at 120 Hz when connected to an NVIDIA graphics card. Nothing like that happens with AMD cards though. The TV is fully compatible with almost everything the current gen gaming consoles offer, including 4K at 120 Hz, HDMI 4 VRR, and FreeSync Premium Pro. It also supports auto low latency mode, so you don't have to worry about switching to game mode to get the lowest input lag. Like all Samsung TVs, the TV doesn't support Dolby Vision at all, which is disappointing if you have an Xbox. Now, lastly, let's talk about the sound, but it isn't very good anyways. It's okay, but surprisingly, it does output a bit of bass. At a moderate volume, it sounds sharp and clear, so you won't have any issues with dialogue. Near the TV's max volume, there's noticeable compression and distortion. So, should you buy this TV? Mid-range models from the big name brands are typically tricky to recommend, as they're often pretty good, but they are expensive and often cost around the same as high-end models from brands like Hisense and TCL. This is the case with the QN85D. It is a great TV, and anyone who owns this is sure to be happy with their purchase. But other models like the Hisense U8K and the TCL QM8 offer even better performance for a lower price. Both TVs are much brighter than the Samsung, with a more powerful local dimming feature, a wider color gamut, Dolby Vision and DTS support, and better gaming features. Currently, the Hisense U8K is still available, but it will be phased out by the newer Hisense U8N. While those two models have their differences, they're both a better value alternative to the Samsung QN85D. The QN85D's predecessor, the QN85C, is sold for a cheaper price now, and it's almost identical to the QN85D outside of contrast and viewing angle. So the older model is the better buy, at least while it's still available and on sale. It's just hard to recommend the QN85D for its asking price, but if you can find it for a big sale, it's an impressive TV that is sure to please, so grab it then. That's all we have to say about the Samsung QN85D. If you want a more detailed write-up on the TV, check out our written review on the website. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Nicholas from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Ciao. Which is amazing. We love flicker-free. I love flicker-free. I love flicker-free.
Good, show us how much.
I love flicker-free. I love free of flicker. Free of flicker is fire. Ay, ay, ay.